Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello. Welcome to Game Over Montreal. I'm here with a newcomer to the Game Over Network, Damien Smith from Game Over Ottawa. The Canadiens just finally broke their 9-game losing streak to the Ottawa Senators here and did it in pretty convincing fashion, I guess, if you look at the score only and don't look at anything else. But hey, it was a game between these two teams, and nobody on either side seemed to get drastically, crazily injured, Damien. So I feel like that's a win for both.
Yeah, for sure. I was expecting a lot more to happen in this game overall because of all the, we had a week and a half to sit on it with the Jack guy and the Greg and the Doc storylines. And I thought there would have been a little bit more, especially with Cousins coming back to the game for the Sens and Kachuk obviously in the mix. But in terms of, I guess, entertainment wise, this was a sort of lackluster game per se, at least from a sense standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, they had that crazy strong start. I really liked their puck pursuit in the first stretch there. They were really pressuring the Canadians and forcing mistakes, keeping them stuck in their own zone. And then they earned a couple power plays and couldn't really get through Sam Montembeault. And it seemed like the Canadians found a way to push back there and were able to find holes through Linus Ullmark. Not that it was necessarily his fault. I don't think he was bad tonight, but the Canadiens defense kind of held a little bit stronger than the Sens did in those tough moments. But we're going to talk about, Lane Hutson, of course. We're going to talk about some players on the Senators who stood out to Damien and the story of this game, maybe a little bit on Nick Suzuki. Big, strong game from him after 2 weak ones to start the year. And of course, Caufield stays hot and Montembeault looks like Patrick Wall out of somewhere. Like, I know he's had good seasons, but the start here has been ridiculous. But before we do, we got to tell you that you got to check out Hyperdrive Hockey. It's on the Game Over Network channel, and it's hosted by Maxime Van Hoot and Daphne Malbouf, produced by Kevin Laramé, and it is so fun, guys. I seriously can't talk enough about this show. It's bringing a lot of stuff that exists in like Quebec and Francophone media to the English side. Every province has their own flavor, but there's this weird language barrier that keeps us from understanding how artists and journalists and different people in Quebec do their thing differently. And we're going to remove that. Not only are we going to have Daphne and Max and Kevin doing this show in English, we're also going to teach you some French hockey terms over the course of the year, both on the Game Over Montreal channel and on the Game Over Network Hub channel. We've got lots of cool plans for you as we go along. So, Damien, obviously, the big one coming out of here, if you follow social media, half the tweets in my feed or threads or blue sky posts, whatever you want to call it, are about Lane Hutson. As an outsider who has heard the hype from Canadiens fans and every team thinks their prospect is going to be the guy, what are your thoughts on Lane Hutson after watching this one?
Well, we were talking about this just before the show. I thought he was going to be a little bit smaller on the ice. This is my first time actually seeing Hutson in a full 60 minutes. I've seen the highlights throughout rookie camp, and I got a glimpse. I got a glimpse of seeing him last year in his 2 games that he played at the end of the season. But man, this guy controls the puck very well, and of course, I know there's a ton of hype, right? Because here's the thing about the younger players when they come out of the collegiate level. And let's be honest here, Lane Hutson should have been a first round pick regardless. And he should have been like a top 10 pick. Just unfortunately, he was, I think, 5'9" at the time and a defenseman. So that's not going to be too great for a lot of scouts. But he controls the puck so well, especially at the line. He's so shifty. And I'm surprised he's not on the first power play right now, but I think at least at the max by the start of next season, he's on the first power play. He's taking over Matheson. What a great performance from him. And I think he's up to a point per game status already in his young career, but very good mobility and not as bad defensively as I thought for Hutson, at least on the eye test.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see, some of the knocks on Hutson get destroyed right away in a way. What I heard a lot from people saying that he was really struggling defensively in college hockey. And I remember watching him at the World Juniors where he was less relied on for like pushing the offense and more relied on to be an all tools player. And when he was given that responsibility, he really stepped up and he was incredible in the World Juniors. I think you could make an argument that he was Team USA's best player, honestly. I know he didn't put up the numbers, but he was incredibly impactful all over the ice in that tournament. World Juniors can tell you a lot of lies. It's a short tournament. You don't want to take it too much as like the only evidence that you take in. But even watching Lane in college hockey, like there are weaknesses in his game. There's weaknesses in everybody's game. But the amount of strengths that he has and the versatility it gives him as a defender, I don't think he's going to be a guy who struggles a lot on the defensive side. I think his intelligence and just his ability to control pucks, as you mentioned earlier, and that like escapability that he has once he gets the puck are going to make him a bit of a breakout machine and really tough to deal with. There will be certain situations like, penalty killing might not be his jam, fighting guys off in front of the net, but this is not Victor Mete. No disrespect to Victor Mete, who was very good at 18 years old when he was rushed into the NHL by the Canadiens years ago. But Lane Hutson is not that. He is shockingly strong, as I think Brady Tkachuk found out when he tried to shove him off the puck at the offensive blue line there. And it ended up in the back of the Senators' net after Hutson controlled the play and found Alex Newhook.
Yeah, I know we're still super early in his career, but I like the way that the Habs have maintained his progress throughout his development, right? They could have brought him in at the end of the 22-23 season. However, they kept him there in college for another year. And especially with a smaller defenseman, you have to let them marinate, right? But the thing is that he already has that NHL ready hockey IQ, which is off the charts. He has the speed. He's got a pretty good shot, and of course, he has the hands, right? So now it's just about learning how to defend at the NHL level. And honestly, I'll be the first one to say this tonight. The Ottawa Senators did not put on a good performance whatsoever tonight. Last on Thursday against Florida, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. There was some stops and starts in that game. However, tonight it just looked like they couldn't get it going whatsoever. I thought the Habs, they capitalized on their opportunities, and Sam Montembeault, of course, we're going to touch on him a little bit later. Whenever there was a break, they scored, and that's how the game ended up coming out at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was a weird one for Ottawa. I mean, sometimes that seems like it's kind of the script in hockey, right? Where if you have that hot start, you're all over the puck, you're putting, pretty decent chances at the net, but you can't get one. You get a power play, and that doesn't like function for you either. The momentum kind of shifts. It's like that saying, when you miss a breakaway at one end, it always ends up in a goal the other end. And oftentimes that's not true. It's just one of those things that people say in hockey. But when you come out of the gates looking like you've got all the fire and brimstone in the world, like the Senators did tonight, and you're not able to get one, and then something goes against you pretty quickly, like Emil Heinemann's first career goal, it falls apart in a specific game, especially teams like the Canadiens and the Senators, who over the last several years have, I don't want to say are not mentally tough, but they are prone to having games get away on them because of maybe youth or inexperience or just the way that their rosters are put together at the moment. It has seemed to me that the Senators are a little bit more immune to that over the last couple of years than the Canadiens, as the Canadiens have been a worse rebuilding team. But the Senators still have those games, and this kind of turned into one of them.
Yeah, and the Sens tonight, I think they really got the crowd get to them too. As we all know, the Bell Center is maybe the best place to play in the NHL. But if you are the road team, it's going to be a tough night, especially on a Saturday night at the start of the season, right? This is your second home game of the year. Luckily, it wasn't the home opener, or else I think the Sens would have lost like 8-1 tonight. But of course, there's a lot of excitement in Habs land, right? Unfortunately, Line A is injured right now, but their top six looks pretty good. I think their depth performed pretty well tonight. Going forward, I'm not so sure really at the moment, but there's some really bright young stars, of course, players like Hutson, and they're getting the goaltending, right? So Montreal's looking good, especially at the start of their season. They're now up 2-1 on the season. We'll see what goes on with the Habs, because obviously they were, I don't want to say like the winners of the offseason really per se, but in terms of hype around the league, there was a
Yeah.
lot of eyes that were put on the Habs over the summer, especially, however, with a quieter start, right? I don't think they did anything on July 1st. They just have all the pieces in place right now, and of course, there is 79 more games for the Habs. Right, there's a
Yeah.
long way to go, and I know if you get a win here on a Saturday night against a rival in the Sens, there's a lot of hype, right? But I think for both squads, I think Sens land is really down on the team right now, with a tough outing tonight. But I think for both teams, we just sort of need to take a step back and understand that there is a long way to go here for both teams.
There very much is. And, you're right that there was a lot of hype around the Canadiens in the offseason. I think it's because, as much as I give credit to the management group for setting the table so that things could fall into place. But the Demidov situation, it did fall to them. You can't really give a team credit for number 2 overall talent falling to number 5 and you being the team that's there. You put yourself in the situation to get lucky there, and you have like the structure in the team where once you have that player, everything looks a lot better. And then they go out and acquire Line. Of course, he's not playing right now, injured a couple more months, but there's a lot of things keyed up for Montreal. But at the same time, the Senators had a lot of pretty decent moves this summer to solidify them. I know that Nick Jensen is not what he once was, but a good veteran presence there. I really like the David Perron ad. And by the way, I know he didn't play a huge amount tonight, but he was killer tonight. He is the ageless wonder. I don't know if you know this, but I used to work at a company called SportLogic, which does like internal data. They're like a private analytics company, essentially. And one of the people that I got to deal with there was literally David Perron, who just sent an email and was like, hey, could I see my stats? He is an absolutely dogged, determined person to improve every single year. And I think it's a big reason why he is like an ageless wonder. He just always seems to be a good player.
Yeah, he's a student of the game. And there's a reason why he's been around for so long. He was drafted back in, I think, 2007 and came into the NHL immediately. I think he was an overager, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, he lived with Walt Kachuk in the St. Louis house, in the St. Louis area with Brady growing up. He's been a little bit quiet, I think, from my perspective so far, in this young season. Got a couple shots tonight. Was a little bit better in Florida, like pretty much the entire other team for the Sens. But you know what? He's going to be a good vocal leader in the locker room. I don't think he's going to score like 30 goals and put up 60 points, but a good middle six forward. And I think he was probably part of the line that was the best tonight with Pinto and Amadio. So, the bar is pretty low overall for the Sens for that tonight. But yeah, a good overall addition, I think. And the thing is about the Sens, at least on paper this season, is I think they're a little bit more balanced. With Chychrun playing the right side, we already had too much of the same thing with Chychrun being a very similar player to Thomas Chabot and Jake Sanderson. Now I just think it's about executing, and I think Ottawa just didn't have a great performance tonight, of course, but I'm a little bit more confident in them this season than I am compared to last year, which I think they were way too top heavy and didn't have a good two-way ability sprinkled around their lineup.
Yeah, I feel like both these teams are a little bit more. I keep on going back to the word solidified in my head. It's not the best word for the situation, I don't think, but both of them have, increased depth in extremely needed areas. And, as much as this game didn't go well for Ottawa, I feel like it was not as messy for either team as the matchups over the last several years have been. And I'd really like to see both these teams take a step. I'm a on the record Ottawa Senators hater. However,
yeah, I've seen it.
I know. And I have been an agitator that has started shit online between Senators and Habs fans. However, ever since starting Game Over and, getting to know Charlie and Maud, and now as I'll get to know you and Nick and Mike, I start to root for the teams just for the people, and I do have a soft spot for the Sens. I have a soft spot for teams that do things mostly right and haven't gotten rewarded yet. And I think the Senators are one of those teams. I hope that they get to get there. I'd like to see this rivalry hit the playoffs again, like it did in the early 2010s. Get some hate back in here. But we're going to talk about some continuing stories for these two teams coming up in the next segment. But before we do, I got to tell you all about LaRouche. LaRouche is a Quebec-based, essentially a Kickstarter thing, but it's much more intertwined into like the communities here. It's a very community-focused program, and we're going to be starting a crowdfunding program there in 6 or so weeks. It's going to take some time to build, but if we hit our goal there, we get access to a significant government grant from the government of Quebec, which would allow us to pay employees for a significant amount of time. So we're going to ask for as much help as we possibly can there. If you have money and you want to support what we're doing here, first of all, thank you so much. It means the world to us because we're trying to create something that lasts and that can pay young people in sports journalism who really don't have outlets anymore to grow themselves and find their voice. We want to be that. And we also want to just build a better community in hockey. I know it can be better. We can get away from the toxic hockey Twitter situation. We can build something better here at Game Over. You can join our company Discord, which is in the description of this chat, and you can come hang out with other hockey fans, hang out with us Game Over folks, have fun. There's lots of stuff to do. And if you're interested in helping support us, you can check out our Patreon as well. Also link in the description of this video. Check out our website, thegameovernetwork.com. We have an incredible merch line designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out here that's really damn cool that we can't wait to show you. However, we got to transition to the next segment. Damien, I'm going to lead off with you here. I'm going to talk about Nick Suzuki shortly, but first, I want to ask you about Linus Ullmark. Obviously, 4 goals against is not a banner game, but how are you feeling just watching him after the preseason and the first couple of games after the last stretch of non-Craig Anderson Ottawa Senators goaltending?
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that it just seems more consistent compared to years past. Like if I compare him to Corpusalo had that ability to make that star-studded save last season, in the 1 year he was on the Sens, and made some crazy acrobatic saves. I think he was not bad athletically, but as he's being exposed so far this year in his one game, I think people really saw that his puck tracking ability wasn't very good. Now, as a player myself, I'm not super knowledgeable on goaltenders, just because goalies are a different breed, right? But I feel like the puck, it's pretty simple to say, but the puck just hits Ullmark. And his performance against the Florida Panthers was very, very good. Of course, as we know, I think he put 30 saves up in 30 saves up in 31 shots. Tonight, it just seems like compared to a lot of the Sens, he didn't have it. However, there was a lot more high danger opportunities given to the Habs. And Ullmark, you know what? He didn't stand on his head like it did in the home opener. Sorry. So not a terrible performance from him tonight. I will not put the loss on him. But it's good that he signed that nice little extension as well. And I'm pretty confident, I will say, in this goaltender, especially for the next 5 seasons now.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned, the pucks just seem to hit him. That's really the sign of a good goaltender in modern times. You know, so much of it is about positioning, being in the right, like anticipating the play, getting there before the puck does, and having it like hit in your chest and drop down into your glove or your pads. Carey Price was like that. You know, I remember just being astounded at how often he was either ahead of the play or just there just at the right perfect time. It's the kind of thing that separates a good goaltender from a great one, is that positioning, the anticipation, feeling where the puck is going. And Montembeault is an interesting one. We'll talk about him in a second, but he kind of doesn't have that. He's just like a pure battler. He's getting it a little bit more. He's more composed. He's kind of like a little bit more flaily, a little bit more like Marc-Andre Fleury-esque, which is I'm sure why Maxime, who's in the chat, loves him. But there's lots to love about him as well. And, you know, Ullmark, that calm feeling that you get as a player when a goalie, you know, isn't going to mess things up for you every night. it hits different, I would say. I'm Andrew Berkshire from Game Over Montreal. I'm here with Damien Smith from Game Over Ottawa. If you're just joining us now, we have talked about Lane Hutson. We've talked about the fact that Ottawa did not bring their best game tonight. Linus Ullmark being a big, nice boost for the Ottawa Senators in general. If you like this show, please smash that like button. Please subscribe to Game Over Montreal. I've been really overwhelmed so far by both the number of people that we've had on the streams with the number of subscribers we have, and also the number of subscribers that have gone up on this channel without any marketing, really. We've just been throwing things up on social media and hoping for the best. Obviously, amazing work by our team, but still, I'm very, very happy and very overwhelmed by the love in the chat for what we're trying to do here. I think we're going to do something really cool, and it's going to be really special. And speaking of special, finally, Nick Suzuki showed up this season. The first two games were very odd. Suzuki's so consistent in his execution and his effort. It just wasn't really there the first two games, but in this one, very early in the game, I started to see a couple little clever Suzuki plays that he always makes when he's on his game. It's stuff like somebody's attacking him on the boards, and instead of putting the puck up the boards, he protects with his back, and then at the exact perfect time sends a puck right through the opposing skater's skates to a player who's coming right in the slot there, in the lane, off in Caufield, because they have a lot of chemistry. But I was really happy to see Nick Suzuki take a step today, and based on the metrics, he actually led the Canadiens with 86% expected goals for while he was on ice, which is pretty darn good considering the Senators dominated that metric most of the game and finished at 57% control. Suzuki was also at 78% of the shots in favor of the Canadiens while he was on the ice. It's been a big change to watch that happen for him and start to catch up to Slafkovsky and Caufield, who have started the season pretty well. I've seen a lot of people kind of going after Slav for his performance in Boston, but I honestly think the first two games, as a Nick Suzuki booster, he's right behind me. I don't know if I went over my correct shoulder there. He wasn't good. He wasn't good the first couple of games. It was below standard for Nick Suzuki. Now this is the standard, and I'm excited to see where he goes with it.
I'm sorry, bad timing there to take a sip of water.
No worries.
Nick's is, yeah, I mean, this is, looking at his game log here, it's sort of a classic Suzuki game, puts up a point, an assist there, +2, over 19 minutes of ice, and a takeaway. As outsiders, we are known how good defensively Suzuki is, especially 5-on-5, and 65% in the faceoff die. I believe that's 13 for 20 tonight. And a very tidy piece of business on a Saturday night. So that's a good performance from him, and we'll see if he can keep it up. And yeah, like, he's a team you want. He's a player you want on your team every single day of the week. I'm jealous that you guys got him for Pacioretty for sure. The one thing I will say is, like, going forward, I know this is big picture and everything. Is he a legit number one center in this league? A player who can put up 90 points, who has that upside? Because we know he has a two-way ability. But when you look at a lot of winning teams who have won the Stanley Cup, pretty much every single one of them has a legit first-line center, star, like superstar player. And, of course, I think Suzuki is a star. However, does he have another gear going forward? He is 25 years of age, I believe. So he's just entering his prime, right? And we know he's a very, very, very smart player. Let's just see if he can get to that little extra level going forward. And, has a good performance tonight. We'll see if he continues that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like that's a common question for the Canadiens rebuild, right? And it's something I think Canadiens fans think about a lot, is like, they're now coming out of this rebuild. Have they done enough? Do they have the elite talent to elevate to a cup contender? And, obviously a lot of it is going to depend on how different players pan out. We've seen Lane Hutson for a few games now. If this is what Lane Hutson is, a lot of questions are answered about the defense. Even without David Reinbacher in the NHL yet, he's out 5 to 6 months with that knee injury. The defense is looking pretty good. Caden Gooley's really solid. I think you've got really good pieces, even if they're not perfect, in guys like Arbor Xhekaj, in Justin Barron, even Logan Mailloux, who had a really strong game in the AHL today after being sent down. I still don't know if he's necessarily part of the future, but he's putting up numbers and seeming to improve quite drastically, which is always a good thing for prospects. But I think the answer is kind of nuanced in that I don't think the Canadiens are trying to build the team that a lot of like experts and especially analytics focused people expect them to, because there's that idea of like, this is the way that you build a team and this is the way that you can win a cup. And I think the Canadiens have kind of looked at it differently and thought, what's the way that we can build a team that has the most possible chances at a cup in a good stretch of time? And they looked at the Boston Bruins, in my opinion, and Jeff Gorton is the one who built a lot of that team. And they looked at how long they've been a competitive team, basically 2010 until now. Even with Patrice Bergeron retiring last year, they were incredible. This year, they look strong again. And I think they're trying to build that Bergeron, Krejci, and then fill out the rest of the roster with like really strong players that have like specific roles. The same way that the Bruins did when they were building things with, and Suzuki is the Bergeron. And the question is more, who is the Krejci? Kirby Dach could be that guy. We haven't seen him elevate to that level yet and maintain health to be able to be that kind of guy. And also it necessitates some pretty strong players on your third and fourth lines to run a lineup like that, right? Because you don't have necessarily the top end offensive talent to get through. Owen Beck is a good option for the Canadiens. They've got some good depth organizationally. So it seems like a fit for them, but whether or not it'll work, who knows? It's never a guarantee, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least right now on paper, you guys have a legit top six, in my opinion. However, just speaking from a perspective of being a Sens fan over the years, I think right now, if I had to compare where you are, is where the Sens were 2 seasons ago in fall of 2022, right? There's a lot of hype coming out of the rebuild per se. Back then, we added DeBrincat, we added Giroux, you added Line, you have Kirby Dach back full time, and of course, you have that top line: Slavkovsky, Suzuki, and Caufield, and they're all locked up, right? Like that entire top line has what, like 6 years left on their contract.
Yep.
With Slavkovsky with 9 more years, than Caufield, I think, with 7. And all at very good cap hits, I will say. No one over $8 million, if I'm correct. And then you have, of course, Line coming in, secondary scoring. You have Kirby Dach, who looks good down the middle. I don't think he's the best face-off wise, if
No.
I'm not mistaken.
He's very bad at it.
But yeah. So sort of like a winger center sort of player. But he can play down the middle. He can, at least. Is he the most like the biggest natural fit for a center? In my opinion, no. But he can still sub in there. And then New Hook, of course, who I think still has some. He scored tonight, of course. He still has a little bit more potential, I think, to give as like a second line forward. And then you look on the back end, right? You have at least like Lane Hutson. Caden Gooley is going to be a very useful defenseman for the Habs going forward. Yes, he's not going to put up 50 points, I don't think. He has some offensive ability, of course. But tonight, he had 8 block shots, right? This guy had 8 block shots for the Habs. And arguably, like other than maybe Montembeault, maybe Hutson, was their best player on the ice, I think.
Yeah.
At least from the eye test. And of course, I will not leave out David Reinbacher. Now, I think there is some work to be done there, of course, but at least you have Lane Hutson, right? And then, of course, sorry, I forgot about Demidov as well in the top 6. So, yeah, just, I know there's been some storylines for him over in the KHL right now, not getting a lot of minutes, and we'll see how that story develops over the year. But there is a lot to be desired in Montreal, and I'm not looking forward to it as a Sens fan. That is a terrifying building to go into. Just the good thing is that you were in the early years of the rebuild, coming out of the rebuild, I'll say. But the thing is that I think for you guys, there's one more season. There's one more season of being in a good spot. A lot of the players, like, they're young and they're fun, and there's not really a ton of expectations. But once that next year comes around, if you don't start winning, you are in for a rude awakening. But that's okay.
Yes.
I'll give you the win tonight, of course.
Well, that's kind of the thing that I've been talking about a lot because I've been doing this show basically since the Canadiens started to be terrible. After that Stanley Cup run, we came in at the perfect time. But what I've been saying is it's kind of the perfect entry point as a fan because you don't have the stress of needing to win. You can just focus on like the fun stuff that happens and like the progress. And if there's progress being made, it's very easy to continue to be hyped up, even though you're losing 50 games a year. And when that gear change happens to where there's an expectation of winning, the fan experience gets way more stressful. I think Leafs fans have been living that. They saw the beginning with Nylander, Marner, Matthews, and the incredible excitement, and now it's all anxiety. So you got to have some sort of returns at some point, and the Senators are kind of at that spot now. The Canadiens are going to get there probably faster than we think, especially if this season continues going as it is. But hey, there's lots to be positive about with both these teams. I think that's the big takeaway is I think they're both going to be really strong teams for a good stretch here.
And it's unfortunate that they're both in the Atlantic, right? Like, is there a bad I know Buffalo's had a tough start, and I'll check their score tonight. I think they won. I'm pretty
good
sure.
for them.
Let's see here. I'm going to look on NHL.com. Yep, they came out with a 5-2 win over the Florida Panthers as well. So, this thing is, you can't say that there's really a bad team in the Atlantic. Everyone said that over the summer. If I had to place like a bet on who's going to be last, like I still think it's the Habs, but
it
like we're
should
still
be.
super. Yeah, it should be right,
Yeah.
but it's like that's a team that could easily be 500, be eighth in the division.
I think that's the weird thing about the Atlantic, right? Is like the Buffalo Sabres could be last this year. They could
Good.
also make the playoffs. Like, I just don't know. The Ottawa Senators,
Mhm.
again, like if Ullmark plays this well and they put up like the underlying numbers that they've had for the last couple of seasons, which are pretty damn good, the Ottawa Senators could make the playoffs this year. The Tampa Bay Lightning could be really good. They could miss the playoffs very easily. I think they're on like the big downswing from their Stanley Cup heyday. The Detroit Red Wings, I feel like they're the most mid team in the entire NHL.
Yeah.
They're just so
Yeah.
uninteresting to me. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be mean to the Red Wings, but like, I don't know what the plan is there. It just doesn't work to me. It just seems like their goal
They're
is to be
trying
okay.
to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're trying to get any sort of. I know they're not like dying for money or anything, of course, but they're trying to get some fanfare in there when it comes to just simply getting into the final 16. That is all they care about. And like I've said this many times, like I don't think Dylan Larkin is he's a great player, of course. Just I think he's a very high end second line center instead of first line center. But
Yes.
Detroit, yeah, um, yes, they've added some free agents. And I think that's a good idea to not make sure that you rush your prospects. Case in point, Buffalo, right, where now they're putting like a guy like Benson in the top 6, and he had a decent performance last year, but you just don't know if he can continue that, and you don't know if that's going to actually help him in his development, right? And so with Buffalo, I mean, I don't want to get too off topic here, of course, but there's been some like rumblings about an internal cap and stuff. And especially when you take a look at their attendance over the past couple of years, and I do not blame the fans whatsoever for not showing up. But yeah, it's funny because you have some teams kind of all over the place in the Atlantic, but you can argue for each and every one of them that they can make the playoffs, or at least be in the conversation.
Yeah, and the only ones that you like expect are definitely making the playoffs. Like there's, it can go up or down, but Toronto should make the playoffs. I assume Boston will make the playoffs. Florida, if they miss the playoffs, it would have to be one heck of a Stanley Cup hangover. And maybe that's what's happening in the beginning of the year here, but I don't expect it. I think that would be really shocking. But the Atlantic is a very tough division, and I think it's only going to get more difficult over the next couple of years before teams like Boston and Tampa really start to fall off, and maybe Toronto as well if they can't handle their cap issues. But it's a really exciting division. I think all the teams except for Detroit play pretty entertaining hockey, which is always fun to watch. But let's shift gears here to our third segment in a moment. Before we do, I got to tell you folks, if you like what Damien's got to say here, if you like Charlie and Maude, if you like, actually you haven't met Nick Robinson yet, I don't think so, but Mike Czar's doing Game On Ottawa on the Game Over Ottawa channel. go subscribe to Game Over Ottawa. I can't tell you guys how proud I am of Charlie and Maud now that, they've been given a little bit of freedom to move, and the things that they've created over this summer. It's really special, and I think the talent that we have on our Ottawa team is absolutely incredible. So I can't recommend you enough. If you're an Ottawa Senators fan here for the first time, if you're a fan of another team who just maybe wants to learn about the Ottawa Senators, subscribe to Game Over Ottawa. You will not regret it. You just click on the channel button right below this video. Go to Game Over Montreal. Scroll all the way to the bottom. There's a featured channel section. You can find Ottawa in there, and you can subscribe to all the other channels too if you want. The Game Over Hub channel's got some great stuff on there, and a lot more planned stuff as we finish going through this staged rollout of the Game Over network. This is a much bigger and grander plan than I think people can understand at the beginning here. Once we get to like the holidays and then into next year, you're going to start to see some of the things that we've got, and the ball's going to start to roll. And I think people are going to be really blown away by the plans here. All right, Damien, we've got Sam Montembeault, and I don't know what to say about him right now because I've been pumping his tires for 2 years. He's had great underlying numbers for a goaltender, goals saved above average, all that stuff. He comes into this year, and still everyone, including myself, is looking at Jacob Fowler as the goalie of the future for this organization. But Sam Montembeault, it seems like every game, slams his foot down on the ice and says, "Not yet." And this was another one.
For sure. I think we're approaching 80 shots over the last 2 games of him, and he's only allowed 1 goal. And that Stützle shot was a tough one to stop. That was a good shot by Stützle off the rush. Yeah, like, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't been super high on Montembeault over the years. Even in the AHL in the past, like, he never had some outstanding records with
No, he
some
didn't.
really good save percentages. Past couple years, right? A 901 in 2023, a 903 in 2024, splitting the starts in the net. Um, Certainly some decent save percentages there. I think maybe a little bit below average. However, you can always point to the Canadiens decor not being the strongest over the past couple of seasons. But he has started the season very well. And now it's 2 games, right? It's 2 games at the end of the day, but has been your MVP so far these first 3 games at least. And we'll see where this conversation goes in terms of the starter at the Four Nations tournaments. They mentioned that on the broadcast tonight, but he just looks calm, cool, and composed to the net there. And you can really see that all the Habs fans are sensing a goaltender who's playing with a ton of confidence right now. Certainly has the potential, I think, to maybe be a good tandem goalie down the line, and maybe even right now. And it's good that you guys locked him up for, I think, 3 more seasons at around $3 million. So a solid goaltender, and I think that's a guy that you can rely on now, at least until Fowler maybe joins the team. But that is a ways away. As we know, goaltenders take forever to develop, as Montembeault's going to be 28 this month. Right? It feels like
he's prime
like,
guy now. Like he's in.
Yeah.
This is what Sam Montembeault is at his peak. I think that's like the big thing to focus on with him.
Well, maybe not the last 2 games, of course, but
Well, I mean, that is peak. He can't get better than that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Candle be unstoppable if that happens. But yeah, like, it is a goalie who's starting off the year hot, and we'll see how this goes. As I've said a lot so far in this stream, we'll see how it goes, right? Because the NHL season is so long. Like, it is so long, and you know what, like, he was their best player tonight, and while the Sens, I don't think did their best job to get through to him, he made the saves while he needed to, and that's a recipe for winning. So good on the Canadiens for also playing a good defensive game tonight. I will say that. The Ottawa Senators, of course, did not put up a good performance. I think if I had to give them the grade, like, it would be like a C- or something. But players like Gouli, players like Savard even tonight, I don't think was that bad. Really stepped up defensively and kept a lot of shots at the outside and prevented a lot of the Senators from getting through to the net. There was I don't think the Sens puck movement was very good this game, but it's also a testament of what the Habs did to just keep those players, the Sens, out of the crease. And it really ended up being the only time that we could get through to Montembeault was off of a Stutzla rush. And I mean, I know Habs fans like pretty much hate Stutzla. And might be one of the players that they hate the most. But if you see Stutzla coming in on the left side there with speed, he has that ability to just snipe it. So, um, yeah, that was a tough stop. Going to be regardless for Montembeault, but yeah,
I'm gonna let you in on a little inside Montreal fans' heads secret. I don't know if people get upset if I say this, but Habs fans don't actually hate Tim Stützle. The people that I hang out with a lot actually really love him. He's an awesome player, and I think we all wish we had him on our team. But we noticed that if you make fun of his diving, which he definitely does, Senators fans get really, really upset. So people just dig in on it more and more. But I genuinely really like Tim Stützle. The play that he made last year, the pass in overtime, you remember the like big whip pass from like behind the net?
right one.
Oh my god. Still, that's like
Yeah.
it runs on highlights in my head. You know, he's that kind of player that you can make a highlight pack out of him every few weeks. And I always love those kinds of players. You know, like a lot of people my age, I grew up on Rock'em Sock'em. You know, not that Don Cherry's a great person to talk about now, but that's what we had available without without YouTube was the VHS tapes. I had the Rock'em Sock'em 5, which was the Habs 93 Cup win, and I watched that probably 200 times at least. You know, it was just constantly on. Eventually, when I was like a young teenager and got my first job, I bought like a TV for my room, and I had a VCR in there, and I'd still be watching that. You know, like getting somebody on the trolley tracks, it is easy to get sucked up in the highlight stuff, and I feel like we don't have enough of that anymore. We need to have some more hockey highlight packs.
Well, I mean, they're all over the internet, of course, but I think, of course, the game's just become that much more skilled right now.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where, like, if you look back at like plays in the early 2000s, like just thinking of a random goal off the top of my brain here, I think it was like Darren McCarty scored a beautiful goal, like in the Detroit run, and he made a couple dipsy doodles and then tucked it in. Like I feel like those goals happen a lot now, so we become a little bit more descent. I don't know, like a little bit more reserved when it comes to it. Unless it's McDavid going all the way down the ice and going 1v5 and stuff. But yeah, like there's a lot of skill in the NHL, as we all know that. It's really
True.
picked up over the years, like just far and beyond.
Even like the last like 6 to 7 years, it seems like there's been a big change in just the amount of skill, like pucks handling skill specifically, that young kids have. Like the talent level in stick handling and skating and edge work from the young players
Mm.
now is just absolutely shocking. Another one
Well,
that I wanted to hit on tonight before we close out there, which we'll do as quick as possible. Cole Caufield, up to 4 goals now. I expected him to start this season well after last season didn't go well. It kind of seems like switching to number 13 in honor of Johnny Gaudreau has ignited a fire in him that he's just finding ways to put pucks in the net. How did you find Caufield tonight?
yeah, I was gonna say earlier too, with like the amount of puck skills that these players have nowadays. Caufield's a prime example of that. Just the way he shifts around on the ice, on the left side on the power play. I'm seeing this guy like skating out there like he's a defenseman and stuff. Just the mobility, and you combine that with the awareness, and of course the shot, as we all know, he's gonna be a very deadly player for the Habs going forward. Um, yeah, like he just keeps getting better every year. There hasn't really been a game against the Sens. Now I know, like obviously the Sens have owned the Habs over the last 2 seasons in terms of the win category, but Caufield's always been around. He's always been a player who's at least put in a goal for the Habs, and that's really what you have him for, right? And he signed for a long time, and I think that contract's just going to get better with age. And he's a goal scorer, right?
Yep.
Goal scorers get hot. They're streaky, and starting out like this, 4 goals in 3 games, +2. He's going to be a great player for years to come, and yeah, he's pretty deadly, man. I will say, like when he gets that puck on the left side and when it's in the Bell Center and watching it as a Sens fan, I get extremely nervous every single time. It takes me back to when like PK Subban was running things, and he'd get the puck and just I feel like the noise level in the Bell Center would just double, right? He just has that electric factor, and there's going to be so many more players for the Habs going forward. I don't want to say too many good words about them, but I mean, when you win 4-1 in Game 3, I'll give you your props. You know.
Yeah, 100%. We're being real nice because it's the first time Damien and I have done this together. So we'll save the trash talk for the next time when the Senators and Habs probably won't behave themselves and Jack I will injure someone or Greg will injure someone and we'll all be upset. We have already got some questions in the chat. So let's shift on to our overtime segment there, Damien, and we'll take some questions from the chat. So for those who are new to the show, this is the time where if you have any questions that are off topic, if you want to ask us directly something, this is the time. It's called overtime. We used to call it the presser, but we're leaning into more hockey terms here. So let's get this going and answer some questions from the stream chat. We had one right away for you, Damien, from Newbie Sports. Says, here's a question. Can we, Ottawa, please see Hamonic ride off into the sunset already? The man's just not there anymore, and Clevin needs a better partner.
Yeah. Going into this offseason, I think it was kind of written in stone that Travis Hamonic, I think every single fan of the Ottawa Senators just thought he was going to get bought out. It just didn't happen. And I've always been a guy who has been a little bit, maybe not defensive for Hamonic, but has understood the type of player that he is. And of course, he's not even close to what he was in his prime days when he was a good top 4 defensive defenseman on the Islanders. This season has been rough for him. And, you know, the bottom pair, if that's your concern, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world for the outlook of your team. But pairing him with Tyler Clevin is not going to work. It's not going to work. You need some mobility on that third pair. I'm sorry. Like, I get that they're both big, two big defensive defensemen who can probably be good on a PK. However, getting the puck out of their zone, we have seen through these first couple of games, it has simply just not worked. I think he's maybe fine as a 7th D, maybe getting in 30 games a year. But we saw it last season that Travis Hamonic, like, he was not what he even has been, even the years before. I think what he was good, in my opinion, in the 23 season, where the Sens were sort of in the playoff hunt, and he actually stepped up when, like, I remember Artem Zub went down and he was in the top 4 and he didn't do too bad, and that's what earned him that contract extension. But Hamonic, keep him in the locker room and stuff, but I think it is time. It is time to give JBD a chance, a legit chance in the top 6 going forward, because it's never going to hurt. It's never going to help that JBD's in the press box as well as a 24-year-old defenseman, right? He's still getting used to the game, and I think it's better for Hamonic, the 33-year-old, I think, at this point, to just take a step back and sub in when they need him to.
Yeah, it's tough, I think, for athletes to, admit when things aren't going their way. And I have gotten to know more athletes over the last couple of years, just more fighters than anything, from the gym that I go to a lot. And I respect all of them so frigging much, because every time that they're partaking in their sport, they're basically risking their own livelihood. It's just an incredible thing to do. But I think it's very hard for all of them when things don't go their way to, like, admit that it was not some, like, cosmic situation that conspired against them to not go their way. It's like, to be an athlete, you have to believe that what you're doing is the best and you are one of the best at your position, and to admit that is almost like the beginning of your career ending. So I think it's really tough for those veteran guys to step aside. That's why I always really respect the vets who are, like, really good to young players, because those young players are going to take your job. It's just a reality of the sport. So if you can internalize that and not let it ruin you and still be a good leader, I have a lot of respect for those guys. I don't know if Hamonic's got that. I have not heard the greatest things about Hamonic in terms of just he's a little bit cranky, but also he's had a different life than most of us. So I don't know. I don't know him, so I don't want to judge him. But in terms of play on the ice, it hasn't been pretty. We got Bernardo Sunyace trying to start fights here. Says, did Subban slash Stone? Yes, very clearly he slashed Mark Stone. I still don't know if it should have been a game misconduct, but he 100% slashed him quite hard.
Man, I forgot about that. I'm not gonna lie. That is so long ago.
That's only because
Was
you're
that
young.
9 seasons ago? Yeah, well, I remember that season, of course, the Hamburglar run. Yeah, Stone was a rise with Stone right there. He was, I think, a top 3 finalist in the Calder voting, and was a little bit of an older. I remember an older rookie. I think he was like 23 or something. But yeah, I think that was the last time the Sens and the Habs met in the playoffs too. So I know there was 2013 as well, and what 2 and 3 seasons. Of course, the Habs got the better of it in 2015. But yeah, I mean, yeah, he slashed him. Though I think Stone dove maybe a little bit. I mean, yes, but he was also like, didn't he have? Wasn't he out for like half the series that year? If I'm
I think he wasn't out, but he was clearly not 100%. Like he came
Okay.
back in that game. I think he came back on that power play, and then he left for a bit. I
Right.
remember them saying that it was they called it a microfracture, which
Yeah.
the actual term that most people would recognize that it's a bone bruise. And people, because they said it was like a microfracture, they thought that they were trying to like make it seem like it was worse than it was, but bone bruises hurt, man. Like there's no
Yeah.
way to get around it.
Well,
And anybody who's watched what Mark Stone's gone through on the injury front over the last, half decade and still been one of the best players in the NHL, it's fun in the playoffs to get on each other and make those jokes, but in reality, then Mark Stone is a tough guy and an amazing player. So yeah, that's how I remember that one. There was another question here about Lane Hutson. I think it was up further. Will he stay at a point per game, from Ian Boisvert? And I will say, no, he won't stay there his whole career. He'll be over. That's my
What?
bold take.
Like season in, season out?
I think the way the NHL is trending, we're in a
Okay.
really high scoring era right now. And
Yep.
what a point per game means in people's heads, which is like they're
Mhm.
still thinking in like 2015 terms, is not the same as now. So like a 60
sure.
point defenseman in 2010 might be like a 75 point defenseman today.
Yeah.
And just like the amount of skill and the way that coaches are coaching for offense now, whereas for most of my life, coaches coached for defense only and the offense was left up to the players. So I think there's a real possibility that he can put up an absolutely astonishing career in terms of point production. He just finds
Yeah,
ways
I mean,
to get in
like,
there.
for sure. Like, I don't think he's going to be a point per game defenseman for his like entire career.
That's a lot.
But I think, yeah, like when you talk about like the peak of his career, I know we're 5 games in his career. Like, this is hilarious that we're talking
I know.
about this right now. But like at his peak, like, maybe like 90. But like, okay, I'm just gonna stop talking because that is so far in the future. I think if it's a successful year for Hutson, he's in around, maybe the minuses might not be great potentially. I don't know. But if he's like -10, sure, whatever. And if he puts up like 50 points, it's a good season. It's a great season actually.
I mean,
And
nobody
he's on
should
pace
be.
to doing that. So
Yeah, nobody should be upset about a defenseman getting 50 points. That's for sure. All right,
no.
folks. There was one more question here about Michael Hage. I'm just going to answer it quickly because it's like very Habs focused. Is it too early to get really hyped up for Hage? He's got 3 games in NCAA, 3 goals, 3 assists, and every single one of his points has been incredibly pretty. Like that's been like the standout. I don't think it's too early to get hyped for him. I don't know what he's going to end up as in the NHL, but I think that from draft day, when I heard his story and saw how he reacted to being drafted by the Montreal Canadiens as a kid who grew up a Montreal Canadiens fan, and I mean, you've seen this with players the Ottawa Senators have drafted or gone after. They do like finding players from the Ottawa Valley. The Canadiens have had historical struggles over the last couple decades bringing in specifically Quebecois players and elevating them to like star status. Samuel Montembeault is kind of in that right now, but because he's the goaltender after Carey Price, he doesn't get the hype that you would imagine in Montreal as a francophone goaltender doing what he's done the last couple of seasons, being arguably the Canadiens' best player. But Hage, I think, is going to be an absolute star here in terms of the fans. I think that he's going to be incredibly well loved. That's how I see him. But Robertson says point per game with 0 goals. Yeah, Lane's going to score one soon. But that's all we have for you tonight on Game Over Montreal and Ottawa. Thanks so much, Damien, for joining me here. And thanks for everyone for joining us as well. We can't wait to be back with you soon. It's going to be really fun. And Game Over Ottawa has some awesome stuff built for you this season. I can't wait for Damien to run his own show and just see how it goes. We'll deal with the tech issues as they come. I know tonight's stream was a little bit choppy, but at least the audio was good. That's what really matters, because nobody likes janky audio. All right, Damien, final word to you, and then I'll close it out.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for bringing me on.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to the next, I think, 3 other times or maybe 4 times that these teams collide. You know what? I'm happy that the streak is just done. We might as well get it over with. That the Habs broke that 9-game slide and right out the gate in the start of the year. So it's going to be a good season, man. It is going to be a good season for our 2 teams specifically. There's a lot of positivity. Now we just got to see the results come out. So thanks for having me on as a guest, and we'll do it down the road for sure.
All right. Talk to you guys later. We'll see you soon.
Good night, everyone.